The last bus of Christmas Eve was running 12 minutes late. Clara Thorne had been standing at stop 147 on Michigan Avenue for nearly half an hour, long enough for the snow to settle on her shoulders like a second skin. She wasn't wearing gloves, couldn't afford a new pair after the heating bill ate through her last paycheck. Well, her last paycheck ever, technically. Morrison and Whitfield had sent her the termination email at 6 p.m. sharp, while the rest of the office was drinking champagne at the company Christmas party. Merry Christmas indeed. Her phone buzzed. Family group chat. Probably another photo from her sister's dinner, the one Clara had claimed she couldn't attend because of work obligations. The truth was simpler and uglier. She didn't have money for the train ticket home. A stray cat emerged from behind the trash cans. Gray, skinny, watching her with the wariness of something that had learned not to trust. Clara crouched down, not caring about the snow soaking through her jeans. "You too, huh?" she whispered. "Alone tonight?" The cat stepped closer, pressed its head against her palm, started to purr. That's when she heard the footsteps. Two figures approached through the falling snow, a man and a child. The man wore a white suit, not off-white, not cream, pure white, the kind of fabric that probably cost more than Clara's rent. But his face told a different story. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, the deep crease between his eyebrows that comes from frowning too much for too long. Clara had seen that look before, on her own face in the months after her mother died, but it was the little girl beside him that made Clara's breath catch. 6 years old, maybe. Amber eyes that should have been bright with Christmas excitement. Instead, they held nothing. The child stared straight ahead, seeing everything and registering nothing. Her hands hung at her sides, empty and still. Clara knew that emptiness. She'd seen it in the pediatric ward during her volunteer shifts. In the children who had stopped fighting. The man stopped a few feet away. He didn't speak immediately. Just stood there, studying Clara with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable. "You were kind to that cat," he said finally. Clara blinked. Of all the things a stranger might say at nearly midnight on Christmas Eve, that wasn't on the list. "Excuse me? The stray, you got down in the snow for it, talked to it like it mattered." Clara straightened slowly. "It does matter. Everything matters to something." The man's jaw tightened. He looked down at the little girl, then back at Clara. "My daughter hasn't mattered to anyone in a year," he said. "Not really." He sat down on the bench, maintaining a careful distance. The little girl remained standing, motionless as a statue. "Her name is Elodie," the man said. "She's 6. She stopped speaking 11 months ago." Stopped speaking? Selective mutism, that's what the doctors call it. Trauma response. The clinical words came out flat, rehearsed. "Her mother died last Christmas. Since then, Elodie hasn't said a word." Clara looked at the child, at those empty amber eyes, at the stillness that wasn't peace but absence. "I've tried everything," the man continued. "Psychologists, speech therapists, art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy. Do you know how much that costs? $600 an hour for my daughter to not look at a horse." He laughed. The sound held no humor. "I have money. I can buy the best specialists, the best facilities, the best toys." He paused. "But I can't buy what she actually needs." "What does she need?" The man was quiet for a long moment. "A memory," he said, "of Christmas, of something warm, something her mother would have given her if she were still alive." He reached into his coat and placed a stack of cash on the bench between them. All hundreds. Clara didn't count, but there had to be at least 100 bills. $10,000, the man said. "For a few hours of your time." Clara's first instinct was to run. Her second was anger. Her third, "I'm not a prostitute." "I know. No defensiveness, no embarrassment, just exhaustion." "I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for something much harder." "Which is?" The man looked at his daughter, then at Clara. His eyes were wet. "I'm asking you to be her mother. Just for tonight." Clara should have said no. Any reasonable person would have said no. A stranger offering $10,000 at midnight on Christmas Eve, asking her to play mother to his silent child? The premise of a horror movie, not a heartwarming story. But Clara couldn't stop looking at Elodie, at the way she stood so perfectly still, like a doll on display, at the amber eyes that had probably once sparkled with life, at the small hands that hung at her sides, empty of everything. Toys, comfort, hope. What happened to her mother? Clara asked. The man's face went carefully blank. Car accident. I was driving. 4 words. A lifetime of guilt packed into 4 words. Elodie was in the back seat. She wasn't injured. Not physically, anyway. He looked at his daughter with an expression Clara recognized. Love tangled so thoroughly with guilt it had become indistinguishable. She was awake for all of it. She saw everything. Clara's chest hurt. I'm not going to take your money, she said. The man's shoulders dropped. Resigned. Defeated. As if he'd expected nothing else. But I'll come with you. The car was a Rolls-Royce. Of course it was. I'm Julian Sterling, the man said as a driver materialized seemingly from nowhere to open the doors. I should have introduced myself earlier. Sterling. Clara knew that name. Tech billionaire. His face had been on business magazines for years. But the man in those photos had been confident, commanding. The man beside her looked like he hadn't slept properly in months. In the back seat, Elodie sat perfectly still. Clara slid in beside her, leaving space between them, non-threatening. Hi, Elodie, Clara said softly. I'm Clara. No response, not a blink, not a twitch. The child might as well have been made of marble. She won't answer, Julian said from the front. She doesn't respond to anyone. Not me, not the nannies, not the doctors, no one. Clara didn't reply. Instead, she settled back in her seat and looked out the window at the snow-covered city. If Elodie didn't want to be spoken to, Clara wouldn't force it. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something. Elodie's head turned. Just slightly. Just for a moment, the child was looking at her. The Sterling house was everything Clara expected and nothing she wanted. 3 stories of glass and marble. A Christmas tree in the front yard that had to be 30 feet tall. Decorations that belonged in a department store window, not a home. Perfect, pristine, cold. It's beautiful, Clara said because it seemed like the appropriate response. Julian didn't answer. He was watching Elodie, who had exited the car without prompting and was walking toward the front door with that same mechanical stillness. Inside, the temperature was comfortable, but Clara still felt a chill. The foyer ceiling stretched 2 stories high. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, another perfect Christmas tree, this one decorated in silver and gold. Not a single handmade ornament. Not a single sign that a child lived here. A woman in a black and white uniform appeared, 50s, efficient, with eyes that assessed Clara in a single glance and found her wanting. Mrs. Chen, this is a guest, Julian said. She'll be staying for dinner. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change, but Clara felt the judgment. Who is this woman? Why is she here? What does she want? Fair questions. Clara wasn't sure of the answers herself. Dinner was served in a dining room large enough to host a state function. The table could seat 20. 3 places were set, 1 at each end, 1 in the middle. The distance between them made normal conversation impossible. Julian sat at one end, Clara at the other. Elodie in the middle, staring at her plate of pan-seared salmon as if it were a foreign object. Chef prepared this especially for tonight, Julian said, his voice slightly raised to carry across the distance. Wild caught from Alaska, flown in this morning. Clara put down her fork. Where's the kitchen? Julian stopped mid-sentence. Excuse me? The kitchen. Where is it? End of the left hallway. But our chef is one of the best in Chicago. There's no need. Clara was already standing. What are you doing? Julian called after her. She didn't answer. The Sterling kitchen was larger than Clara's entire apartment. Marble counters, professional-grade appliances, a refrigerator that could supply a restaurant, and not a single personal touch. No photos on the fridge. No handwritten recipes stuck to the cabinet. No evidence that anyone actually lived here. Clara opened the refrigerator, full, of course. She pulled out a whole chicken, carrots, celery, onions, garlic. Found a large pot in one of the many cabinets. Started filling it with water. The chef appeared, a middle-aged man in pristine whites. Excuse me, can I help you with something? I can prepare. Take a break, Clara said without looking up. But, I've got it. The chef looked at Julian, who had followed Clara into the kitchen. Julian hesitated, then nodded. Give her the space. The chef retreated, radiating offended dignity. Clara placed the pot on the stove, turned on the flame, started preparing the vegetables. What exactly are you doing? Julian asked. Making soup. Soup. I have a professional chef who trained at chicken soup. Clara's hands kept moving, peeling, chopping. My mother used to make it. whenever I was sick, whenever I was sad, whenever there was nothing else left. She paused, looking at the pot. When she died, I couldn't eat for 3 days. Then I made this soup. It wasn't as good as hers, but the smell was the same. Julian was quiet. Your daughter doesn't need gourmet food, Clara said. She needs something that smells like home. The smell spread through the house, not complex or sophisticated, just chicken, vegetables, salt, herbs. The smell of simple kitchens, of winter evenings, of mothers who came home tired but still made something warm. Clara hummed as she stirred. An old lullaby, something she barely remembered learning. It had been her mother's song, then hers, passed down like a worn blanket, a small sound behind her. Clara turned. Elodie stood in the kitchen doorway. Her hands still hung at her sides, her face still held that terrible emptiness, but she was looking at Clara. Actually looking. Those amber eyes focused on the pot, on the steam rising, on Clara's face. Julian inhaled sharply. Clara raised a hand slightly, signaling him to stay still. Would you like to taste it? She asked Elodie softly. No answer, but the child took a step forward. Then another. Until she was standing beside Clara, close enough to touch. Clara ladled soup into a small bowl, blew on it to cool it down, held it out. Elodie looked at the bowl, then at Clara, then at the bowl again. She took it, raised the spoon to her lips, tasted. Julian made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Clara didn't look at him. Her entire focus was on Elodie, on the child who was now taking a second spoonful. A third. Something flickered in those amber eyes, faint, uncertain, but present. After dinner, half a bowl of soup, Julian whispered, more than Elodie had eaten in weeks. Clara carried the child upstairs. Elodie's room was a catalog fantasy. Canopy bed, designer furniture, shelves of toys still in their packaging, books with uncracked spines. Everything a child could want, and nothing she apparently did. Except for one thing. On the pillow sat a stuffed rabbit, so worn its original color was a guess. One ear had been mended with mismatched thread. The button eyes had lost their shine years ago. Something loved. The only thing in this room that showed signs of being touched. Elodie climbed into bed, pulled the rabbit close, looked at Clara with those waiting eyes. Would you like me to read to you? Clara asked. No answer, but Elodie didn't look away. Julian appeared in the doorway. I could read to her. I have some excellent books on leadership and strategic. She's 6 years old, Clara said flatly. Julian fell silent. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't reach for any of the pristine books. Instead, she began to sing. The lullaby, her mother's song, the same melody she'd been humming in the kitchen. Elodie's eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. And Julian, Clara saw it in her peripheral vision, staggered against the doorframe as if he'd been struck. When Clara finished and turned around, he was gone. She found him in his study, sitting in the dark, holding a framed photograph. That song, he said without looking up. His voice was raw. Where did you learn it? My mother. Why? Julian set down the photograph. Even in the dim light, Clara could see a woman with brown hair laughing, holding a toddler in her arms. A younger Elodie with bright eyes and an open smile. Sophia, Julian said. My wife. She sang that song to Elodie every night, from the day she was born. Clara went very still. I didn't know Elodie remembered. Julian's voice cracked. I thought she'd forgotten everything. The therapist said trauma can do that. Block out memories, good ones along with the bad. Children remember more than we think. Apparently. Julian stood abruptly, walked to his desk, pulled out another stack of cash and set it down. 20,000 for your trouble. You can leave now. Clara looked at the money, then at Julian. Then at the photograph of Sophia and Elodie, frozen in a happiness that no longer existed. You're not sending me away because I did something wrong, she said slowly. You're sending me away because I did something right. Julian's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. You're afraid. Clara took a step closer. You've spent a year trying to fix your daughter with money, specialists, treatments, toys. And in one night, I made more progress with a pot of soup and a song. That's not. It makes you feel like a failure, like you should have known. Like if you just learned your wife's lullaby instead of buying another therapy session, maybe Elodie would have. Stop. The word came out ragged. Just stop. Clara stopped. Julian stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. I was supposed to be home that night, for Christmas Eve. But there was a deal. There's always a deal. Sophia drove Elodie to her grandmother's alone. He paused, drew a breath. The other driver ran a red light. Sophia died on impact. Elodie watched her mother die in the driver's seat for 45 minutes before the ambulance arrived. Clara closed her eyes. The last thing Sophia ever said to me was, "The deal can wait, Julian. Christmas can't." His laugh was hollow. She was right. She was always right. And I didn't listen, and now she's dead, and my daughter looks at me like I'm a stranger, and I deserve it. I deserve all of it. Clara didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "You can't buy forgiveness, Julian. Not from Elodie, not from yourself. I know. But you can earn it." Julian turned. His eyes were red. "How?" "By being here. Not your money. You. Learning what she needs instead of buying what you think she should want." Clara glanced at the photograph. "Your wife sang to her every night. Have you ever tried?" "I can't sing." "Neither can I, but I tried anyway." Julian looked at her for a long time. "Who are you, Clara Thorne?" "Someone who lost her mother too," Clara said simply. "Someone who knows that grief isn't a problem to solve, it's a road to walk. And walking it alone is the hardest thing in the world." Clara left before dawn. She didn't take the money. Any of it. On the kitchen counter she left a note. "Julian, I came tonight because you saw kindness in how I treated a stray cat. Your daughter is not a stray. She's not a problem to solve or a wound to fix. She's a child who lost her mother and doesn't know how to carry that weight. Neither do you. That's okay. No one does. Elodie's rabbit had a torn ear. I mended it while she slept. I hope she doesn't mind. If you want to find me, I volunteer at the Lincoln Park Community Center on Saturday mornings. I teach art to children there. No charge. One more thing. Your wife's lullaby. Learn it. Sing it to Elodie. Badly, off key, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you try. Love isn't a transaction. It's a choice you make every day." Clara outside. The snow had stopped. The sky was turning pink at the edges, the first light of Christmas morning creeping over the city. Clara walked to the bus stop, waited for the first bus of the day, got on, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel empty. Julian found the note at 7 a.m. He read it 3 times. Then he walked upstairs to Elodie's room. His daughter was awake, sitting up in bed, clutching the worn rabbit with its newly mended ear. She was looking at the stitches, neat, careful, done with thread that almost matched. "Daddy?" Julian's heart stopped. What did you say?" Elodie looked up at him. Her amber eyes weren't empty anymore. They were confused, scared, but present. "The lady," Elodie whispered. Her voice was hoarse from months of silence. "Where did she go?" Julian crossed the room in 3 strides. He knelt beside his daughter's bed, tears streaming down his face. "Say it again," he begged. "Say anything, please. Daddy needs to hear you." Elodie touched his wet cheek with one small hand. "Don't cry, Daddy." Julian broke. He gathered his daughter in his arms and sobbed, 11 months of fear and grief and loneliness pouring out in the first real embrace they'd shared. Sophia died. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Elodie's arms came up, wrapped around his neck, held on. "Daddy," she said again, trying out the word like something she'd forgotten. "The soup lady," she sang Mommy's song. "I know, sweetheart. I know. Can she come back?" Julian pulled back to look at his daughter, at the eyes that were finally seeing him again. "Yes," he said, "she can come back." He found Clara the next Saturday at the Lincoln Park Community Center. She was exactly where she'd said she would be, surrounded by children and finger paint, her hair pulled back, her secondhand sweater covered in glitter glue. She looked up when he entered but didn't stop helping a small boy cut out a paper snowflake. Julian waited. When the class ended and the parents collected their paint-covered offspring, Clara walked over. "She's talking," Julian said without preamble. "Elodie, she's talking." Clara's face transformed. The same expression he'd seen on Elodie when she tasted the soup. Hope, fragile but real. "That's wonderful. She asked for you, every day since Christmas. When is the soup lady coming back?" Clara smiled. "Soup lady?" Her words, not mine. They stood in silence for a moment. Around them, the community center hummed with the ordinary sounds of ordinary lives. Children laughing, parents chatting, volunteers cleaning up. "I did some research," Julian said finally, "after you left." Clara's expression flickered. "Research?" "On you. On Mercy Hospital. On their volunteer records from 2 years ago." Clara went very still. "You were there. Julian said quietly. The night Sophia died, you volunteered at Mercy Hospital. Julian, you held her hand, the nurses told me. A volunteer sat with her for hours, singing, talking, holding her hand. They couldn't save her, but she wasn't alone. Clara's eyes were wet now. She said something to you before she died, didn't she? A long pause. Yes. What did she say? Clara drew a shaky breath. She said, if you ever get the chance, take care of my little girl. My husband is a good man, but he doesn't know how to love without a contract. Show him, please. Show him it doesn't cost anything at all. Julian felt like he'd been punched in the chest. You didn't find me by accident, he said slowly. At the bus stop, you knew who I was. I recognized Elodie. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. From the photo in Sophia's hospital room, the photo she looked at until the very end. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have thought I was crazy, or a con artist, or worse. Clara met his eyes. Would you have trusted me if I'd walked up and said, Hi, I held your wife's hand while she died, and she asked me to take care of your daughter? Julian was quiet for a long time. No, he admitted finally, I wouldn't have. So I waited, followed the news about you and Elodie. Read about the treatments that didn't work, the specialists who couldn't help. And when I saw you at that bus stop on Christmas Eve. Clara shrugged. It felt like a sign, or maybe I was just looking for an excuse. To do what? To keep a promise. Julian looked at this woman, the stranger who had held his dying wife's hand, who had kept a promise for over a year, who had walked into his home and broken through the wall around his daughter in a single night. I'm not going to offer you money, he said. Good. I wouldn't take it. But I am going to offer you something else. He held out a folder. Clara took it, opened it, scanned the contents. A foundation, she said, in Sophia's name. For children who've lost parents. For families dealing with grief. For the things money can't fix but resources can help. Julian paused. I want you to run it. Clara looked up. Julian, not because I owe you, not because Sophia asked you to take care of Elodie, because you're the only person I've met who understands that love isn't a transaction. Clara closed the folder slowly. Elodie needs stability, she said, not another person who comes and goes. I know. If I do this, I'm not just an employee, I'm part of her life. I know that too, and yours. Julian met her eyes. I'm counting on it. 1 year later. Christmas Eve. The Sterling house looked different. The tree was still tall, still decorated, but this year there were handmade ornaments mixed with the designer ones. Paper snowflakes Elodie had cut, painted stars Clara had helped her create, a lopsided reindeer Julian had attempted and hilariously failed at. The dining room table was smaller now, 3 seats, close enough to touch. Dinner wasn't catered, it was chicken soup. It's better this year, Elodie announced on her 3rd bowl. You're getting good, Daddy. Julian glanced at Clara. I had a good teacher. You burned it twice, Clara reminded him. Learning experience. Elodie giggled. The sound was still rare enough to make Julian's heart clench every time he heard it. After dinner, after dishes, after hot chocolate by the fire, Elodie climbed onto Julian's lap. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? Can you sing Mommy's song? Julian's throat tightened. He still couldn't carry a tune. Clara had tried to teach him, and the results had been, in her diplomatic words, memorable. But Elodie was waiting, looking at him with those amber eyes that had finally come back to life. Julian began to sing. It was off-key. It was probably wrong in several places. Clara winced at least twice. But Elodie smiled, rested her head against his chest, and when he finished, she whispered, Mommy would have liked that. Julian looked at Clara over his daughter's head. Thank you, he mouthed. Clara smiled. Merry Christmas. Outside, snow began to fall. Soft and gentle this time, the kind of snow that belongs in movies, the kind that makes everything look magical. And in the living room of a house that had finally learned to be a home, a family that had been broken began to heal. Not because of money, not because of therapy or specialists or expensive treatments, because of soup and a lullaby. And a stranger at a bus stop who had kept a promise to a dying woman. Love isn't a transaction. It never was. And that's where our story ends tonight. If this touched your heart, you're not alone. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. A snowy bus stop, a bowl of soup, a stranger's kindness. Thank you for staying until the end. If you felt something, hit that like button. subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We bring you moments like this every single day. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of ordinary kindness.